There's a lot going on out here, but finally some progress. You're not going to believe this building and what's in this box. It's all coming up right after this. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to the Garden Home, a show about blurring the lines between inside and out. Hey, we're still well under construction here at the Garden Home Retreat, but finally, we're getting some finished results. I can't wait to show you the studio space here. Now, this building's going to be used for lots of different creative activities. You just wait. I've got several to show you in today's show. And, well, what's in this box you're going to find interesting too, but you're going to have to wait for that. Why don't you come on inside and let me give you a little tour. As you can see, this space has really changed. My gosh, what a coat of paint can do for a place. You know, what's great about this is that this room is only 24 by 16, but it feels so much larger because of the paint color I chose. If you look at the walls, you can see that there are actually two shades of white, sort of an ashen white on the walls, which is flat paint, and then the trim is done in a semi-gloss. And I also used a semi-gloss to paint this brick. Yes, I painted the brick, and doesn't it look great? Now, above you can see we have some beams. Those are those big cypress beams with the king post, and they were painted with the flat white paint as well. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Now, take a look down here at the fireplace. I love this thing because it is so efficient. You can see that a small fire like this really keeps this entire space really cozy. Now, what's great about this design is that it's very old. It comes from the 18th century. It was designed by Count Rumford in England, and it still works great today. Now, when we built this, the fireplace itself is built of those 17th century brick, you know, the ones that were made in wooden molds, so they're very irregular looking. And then on the inside, you have fire brick that can take the high heat of the fire. Now, if you look here at the hearth, we use some clay pavers here, which are sort of a nice brown color, which are going to be a great complement to the color I'm going to paint this floor, which is a dark, bittersweet chocolate called mink brown. Now, speaking of color, just take a look over here. What we have is a pillow that reflects some of the accent colors that we're using here. You're actually picking up the colors of the fire in the fireplace. But this pillow has a wide range of warm colors set against cool neutrals like the fabric used on these chairs. And what's great about this fabric is that it's indoor-outdoor. Perfect, huh? Blurring the lines between inside and out. Now, another companion that goes right along with this, which helps us achieve that goal of living inside and outside, are these wonderful French doors. On the east and west side of this building, you can open them up and commune with the garden. From the inside of this building, because of the monochromatic color scheme, it feels very contemporary. But on the outside, it's very traditional. You have a red fireplace, you have the tinner's red roof, and of course you have these French doors and a clapboard building. Now, between this building and the summer kitchen, we're going to have a croquet lawn, but right now, well, we're dealing with some erosion issues, and as you can imagine, it's a pretty messy place. But in time, it will be gorgeous. I was in Rosemary Beach, Florida a few years ago, and it was really fun to see the croquet lawn they had put in. And we caught up with a few kids who were taking advantage of a beautiful day to get outdoors and play. And you see, that's what it's all about, you know, looking for ways to enjoy nature by blurring the lines between inside and out. I have to say, there's something about a beautiful lush lawn that is so intriguing to me. It's the perfect foil for flower borders. It can be a great accent to a house. And hey, not to mention on a summer day, walking across it barefooted. You know, out here at the Garden Home Retreat, we trial lots of different vegetables and flowers and trees, everything, you name it, including grasses, different varieties of grass seeds, as well as ways of establishing turf. Along the drive leading from the main road to the property, we used a method called hydroseeding. where grass seed is mixed with water, a water retentive polymer, and a wood pulp, and then it's sprayed on top of prepared soil. A giant water gun spraying out this green blob of gooey stuff looks like something out of a sci-fi movie, don't you think? What I've discovered is that when you can keep the hydroseed mix moist, then you have the best results. And unfortunately, along the drive where we're depending on Mother Nature for moisture, our rate of success hasn't been what it would have been in a more cultivated area where we could have controlled the water with an irrigation system. Now, down in the vegetable garden, to get to turf, we relied on laying sod, and we went to some great lengths to ensure success here. You see, it was important to prepare the soil and to create a slight crown in the middle of this path. You see, this area gets a lot of traffic. It is a lawn, but it really serves as a path. The overnight results of transformation like this goes without saying, but I should point out that sod is a bit more expensive than hydroseeding. Now, another method, which is certainly tried and true for growing grass, is from seed, using a broadcast spreader and then pressing the seeds into tilled soil with your feet works fine in a small space, but in a larger area you may have to resort to some heavy machinery to get the job done right. Of course, it goes without saying that every method of growing turf, water is critical, and you must keep the soil moist for good results. Now, eventually, I see an entire lawn stretching across here in some form of fescue. The reason I love fescue is that it's green during the winter. And so looking out on a gray day, seeing that lush, vibrant green, well, it does nothing but lift the spirits. Now, you see these two pipes here? What's interesting is they connect to a 6,000-gallon underground tank. And we're going to harvest rainwater off these buildings and collect it here to use to water this lawn as well as the garden. Now, I'm having some other water issues right now. During construction, we're dealing with erosion and also a lot of mess. So what I've done in certain areas around the buildings, we've used this landscape fabric, we've rolled it out, and then I'm covering it with wheat straw. This is just a temporary measure, again, to keep the mud down. Now, I'll reuse this and use it for its intended purpose. We'll take these sheets, we'll lay them down in the garden and use them as a weed barrier, or we'll use them in the creation of French drains. This used to be a real sore spot in my garden. The water always collected here. I came up with a simple solution by using a French drain. Let me show you how I put it together. First, I created a basin by digging a trench. The size of the trench was important because it determined the amount of water that could be drained or collected. I made this trench about 18 inches wide by 18 inches deep. Then lined the trench with a nylon fabric and made sure to leave plenty of room for overlap on the sides. Next, I put in about 2 inches of gravel in the bottom of the basin and laid in a piece of plastic drain tile. This is about 4 inches in diameter and cut to fit the trench. This pipe collects and holds most of the water, and it's corrugated so it makes it very flexible. And these little holes allow the water to trickle in. You can pick it up at just about any builder's supply. Finally, I covered the pipe with 2 or 3 inches of gravel and used the overlapping sides of the fabric to seal it off. Then I simply filled in with a lighter, sandier soil. You can cover an area like this with turf, or you can use large flat stones like I have here. Now, when you talk about building green, there are lots of layers of green. The things that we see at first glance, like finishes such as paint. This one, by the way, is a low VOC paint, which is very good for the environment. Or the kinds of flooring and so forth. Well, those are immediate, and we're aware of those. But then there are also lots of components that are buried and even behind the walls, such as the case in this building. Just a few weeks ago, behind these walls was foam insulation made from soybean oil. You see, this stuff is about as green as it gets because it's made from farm-grown soybeans. What they do is they extract the oil from the bean and then through a chemical process prepare it such that when it's sprayed, it performs like a foam against the wall and attaches to it. You see, it expands to fill the void between the studs and creates an amazingly airtight seal. Abby O'Hanlon tells us more. Well, when you think about the cost of energy and the cost of heating and cooling our homes,
Right.
it really does make sense to sort of sit down and look at what your costs are now, and if you have an opportunity to seal up the house and try to save and contain that energy, it does pay off over the long haul.
Yes, it does.
Okay, now Abby, is this blue stuff, for lack of a better word, the denim that you were telling me about?
Yes, it is. It is actually a sustainable product to offset some of the cost of spray foam.
For some reason, I had it envisioned as like, you know, chopped up jeans where you saw the like buttons and zippers and all.
Right, and I can understand how you would see that.
But it's shredded.
Yes, it is. It's
Yeah.
actually, it's almost kind of woven together.
Why would I use that as opposed to the soy foam?
It's very good as far as cost.
Okay.
Spray foam is probably 2 to 3 times more than conventional insulation. And we do recommend that you do use it on inside walls, not exterior walls, for sound attenuation or cold walls, where you might, let's say, between the garage and the living quarters.
Sure.
That's a very good use for this cotton bat.
It's another recycled product.
It is a renewable resource.
Now you may be wondering, what is the function of this space? Well, this building certainly balances the summer kitchen, so it creates a sense of symmetry and balance in the architecture of the entire garden home retreat. And historically, these outbuildings were called dependencies because they help support the main house. This would have been used as a summer kitchen or a smokehouse or something like that. But what I'm going to use it for is a little studio, a place to get creative. And what I found here, one of my trips, is another bust. And you see, this one's terracotta that's been painted white. And even though it's got a crack on the base of it, I got it for a great price. And what I'm doing is I'm using them to line across the top of this cabinet, which I'm keeping all my paint supplies in. So you can see all those little boys up there. There's Nero and Caesar and Hesiod and Brutus and so forth. So while I'm working on these projects, the old boys will be looking down on me. Now, one of the things I love to do is I love to dabble in paint. So I've got some easels set up, and this cabinet will house all my various sets of paints and so forth. But this will also serve as a place for other sorts of projects. The garden, of course, is full of inspiration, and I've enjoyed in the past painting with artists in my garden during what we call a paint out. But perhaps one of my most enjoyable al fresco or plein air painting adventures was out in California when I met up with Jeff Smith and Sandra Bradford. Sandra, you came to designing gardens through painting, didn't you?
I did. I actually started to do it as a practical ways to make a living, and really found that I was able to use my creative ability to not only to draw designs, but to actually put flowers together. I was never very good at remembering all the plant names. But,
You know, I find it so much easier to limit the palette I'm working with to just a few colors, whether it's painting or designing a garden, by using just a few flowers of the same color family. It really makes more impact.
yeah, I have to agree. I mean, there's something about when you first go into a nursery and you're hit by all these rows and rows of colorful plants, and you think, well, I'd like to have all of that.
Right.
It works the same way in painting. You go in and you find these rows and rows of pre-mixed colors, and you're just like, hey, I'd love to have that. But what happens when you end up putting it on your palette, you end up with too many different things going on in your painting. It's best to start out with one overall color.
Yeah, what I've done is I've picked a point in the garden that interests me the most, a simple thing, and I've established my colors for the whole painting, my big areas, my framework, and I'm really interested in that light on that fountain, so I've moved into that area to define that a bit more. That's going to be my center of interest. I would imagine in gardening it works much the same way. Establish a center of interest,
Yeah, I think it
and
helps.
then frame around that, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. You want a focal point. You want something that the eye immediately goes toward. It could be a path, a bench, an urn, a fountain, a beautiful tree.
So a lot of the same principles apply to both painting and designing of a garden.
It's interesting to me how one discipline can often instruct you in another. For instance, painting on a canvas can teach you something about garden design. And here's an example of framing the view or creating a picture through this arbor this hooped arbor looking down to a focal point, we see an old 19th century urn. And along the way, in the spring and summer, you'll have tall bearded iris growing along the edge. And you can see I've got some pots along here that need to be planted. And I like to sow nasturtiums all along the edge, and so they spill out into the center of the path with all of their beautiful flowers. Now let me give you another example here at the Garden Home Retreat where we're framing a view or creating a picture. I think that framing views is important in every season. Even in the winter, you want to make sure that you frame your composition. And I've used the ancient art of espalier to do that here, framing the little tool shed. On this side and that side of this tiny garden, I have a wall of, well, it's twigs now because there's no fruit, flower, or leaf. But what we have here is a gala apple, and I've pruned this one back, but I've left this one over here for you to see. You see, throughout the summer, they produce all of these vertical stems. And so I've gone through and I've clipped them off of this one. As you can see, it's beautiful skeleton. Throughout the spring, they were covered with tiny little apples that developed over the course of the summer into big red fruit. As you can see, this has been not only a beautiful, but a delicious way to frame a view. You know, if you just let your imagination run wild, you can come up with all sorts of ways of framing views in your garden. You know, when you really get into this idea of taking things that you typically see outdoors and moving them inside and vice versa, taking things that you see inside and moving them outdoors, it can be a lot of fun. Take a look at this whimsical little creation I put together. I just took a vertical pair of hickory limbs, put a horizontal line across here, and then set these various models of birdhouses on the top. Now I'm going to paint them all white. This will make a great coat rack. So what I've done is I've taken something that is typically seen outdoors, twigs and birdhouses, and brought them inside. I think it's so important to sort of match the spirit of the place. For instance, this is light and contemporary, and this is light and whimsical, so it really does fit. For instance, you want something that matches the furnishings. Say you have a room that has dark wood, maybe some rich colored fabrics. You may want to echo that in the foliage of plants you use, such as a croton or even a series of terrariums. For a lighter, more airy approach, you can bring in bright colors on fabrics and use cheerful Gerbera daisies or brightly colored orchids. It's interesting to me how certain plants come and go with regard to fashion. For instance, if you look back to Victorian times, well, they loved all kinds of tropical plants, but they had a particular interest in palms. Teresa Bulin tells us about some of the style trends modern designers are incorporating both inside and out. You know, Teresa, I have to say that when it comes to design elements, color has to be one of the most compelling, and I think it gets people really excited.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, you know, I think people are also terrified of color. I mean, I talk very confidently about color, but I know when I'm painting a room, you put that first coat on, you, have I done the right thing or not?
Right.
Or if you order some fabric and a chair like this, you
That's
know,
right.
I do a bit of nail chewing. Remember that? Yeah.
And you don't realize that you can get your color in your frame. You know, you can start with your frame. And
Well, I think you really should,
Yeah,
shouldn't you,
yeah.
before you start choosing fabric.
Exactly.
Well, this is one of my favorites. This is weathered green, and I have this on my porch, and I love it.
That is a wonderful color. Well, as a matter of fact, I have this one on my porch.
Oh, really?
I do. It's mocha. And
Okay.
the cushions that I have in it, you can work a lot with the color of cushions, but I chose a solid color because I have animals and it's just a little easier. But you can add some color with your toss pillows.
Now, what do we have here? I guess these are several of the different finishes of these particular pieces of wicker. I noticed some of them are weathered, like the one I have is weathered like this.
That's right. It has become more popular over the past few years.
What do you find to be maybe a color theme? Does it change a lot from year to year, or do people tend to hang toward the classics?
Yeah, I think people do. Whites maybe not are as popular as they used to be. They're coming into more warmer colors.
And maybe clearer, bolder colors are more popular
Right.
now. I seem to see that.
Yes.
And they're certainly represented here. I mean,
Exactly.
just look at that. Isn't that gorgeous?
Oh, yeah. Like if you had your group in a more traditional standard color, add a little color to a little side table or your cocktail table. You don't have to have the whole group in one color.
Well, it's actually, I think, nicer and makes it more interesting if you do have a few elements there that pop.
Right. I think
Yeah.
you're right.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
Welcome to the Design Studio. Here's where we take photographs that you send in, we examine the pictures, and I give you some ideas that hopefully will be helpful as you improve your landscape. Today we're taking a look at Diane's house in Connecticut. Now, one of the things that she pointed out in her email to me is she felt like that the shrubs here in front were really too big, that they've become oversized, and I think she's right. So we're going to talk about that. The other thing that she pointed out is something she'd really like to have, and that is an arbor that is covered in pink roses. So let's get started. I think the first thing is to probably remove these large shrubs, Diane. They're really completely out of scale for the house, and it's such a beautiful house, very, very charming. So why don't we get rid of those, and let's talk about now what you can plant. What I'd like to see at a foundation is a pair of evergreen shrubs to sort of punctuate this entry. So just behind this birch tree, you would have a pair of evergreen plants. They could be Japanese Andromeda, they could be yews, they could be boxwoods, just something evergreen. And then in the bed along the edge here, I think that you could probably do something perennial. You could use Solomon seal or fern. I could see any of the native ferns along here, which would be really quite lovely. Now, as far as this shrub down here on the end that you can just see in the photograph you sent me, I would probably leave it to punctuate that corner. Now, under the ferns, you could come back with a low ground cover like a juga or maybe even periwinkle or the little vinca minor that has that gorgeous periwinkle blue flower. And then something I want you to think about, that's maybe bringing a flagstone path that would come right across the front here. It might require expanding that bed from the porch edge out to the walk a little bit, all the way down here to this side. There's where you could have your arbor, and you cover it with a gorgeous pink rose. My side entry to my townhouse, I have an arbor with a New Dawn rose growing over it, and when it's in flower, it is spectacular. Now, with this path in place, what we can do is we can come out here and look at this bed for just a moment. I would carry whatever we did here down this end of the house like this. I see you've got a dwarf Alberta spruce there. I would leave it. Then I would probably expand this bed just a bit like this, all right, under the multi-trunk birch tree. I would put a rhododendron here, and you might have, if you pulled this path this way away from the house, room for another rhododendron right here, not so close to the porch. So those would slightly balance. And then around here, as a ground cover, I would fill that in with, again, the ajuga, or you could use English ivy or the periwinkle, and then punctuate that with some big bold leaf hostas that would come up year after year. Some like Francis Williams or Some in Substance, some of those with really big leaves. Well, Diane, I hope these ideas are helpful to you. You sure have a beautiful place. Good luck with your project. I can't tell you how excited I am to finally have some completion. Now, we're not totally complete here. We haven't fully moved in, but I can already feel the creative energy bubbling up in this little studio. And I hope that over time, it'll be a great place to generate ideas for blurring the lines between inside and out. After all, that's what the whole garden home concept is about. What works inside, works outside. I hope you've enjoyed today's show as much as I have. Until next time, from the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Alan Smith's Garden Home.
Things are really heating up out here at the Garden Home Retreat, which is a great sign of progress. We're also seeing significant changes to the summer kitchen. And I've got a story for you about this space. From the fireplace to potential countertops, it's all information that folks building or remodeling can benefit from. Looking forward to our next visit right here at the Garden Home.